Chair recognizes Mr. Cantwell of Marshfield.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and through you to members of the House. Mr. Speaker, this being my maiden speech, I am mindful, Mr. Speaker, of the example of a fourth grade student who was once asked to do a book report on a famous historical figure. This book report went as follows. It was on Julius Caesar. His book report stated, Julius Caesar was a great leader and emperor. He made long and boring speeches. They killed him. With that in mind, Mr. Speaker, I'll be brief today in my comments. And Mr. Speaker, I appreciate your advice that I should do a maiden speech on something easy and universally accepted. I decided instead to talk about 40B.
It's a good start. I'm so glad that you listened to me, my advice.
Mr. Speaker, my introduction to 40B came in the form of a high-density condominium complex that was proposed to be on the land of a former state representative in this very chamber, later to be a U.S. Senator from Marshfield. The gentleman's name was Daniel Webster. This is not the distinguished gentleman from Pembroke. This is the former U.S. Senator who has a famous historic property in Marshfield. That proposed 40B complex, which would have been the equivalent of a 5-story building in a residential neighborhood, was defeated not because it was inconsistent with local zoning, but because it would have imperiled drinking water. Our effort to save this nationally significant property was highlighted by Bob Vila in his Restore America series. Mr. Speaker, there are multiple lessons that I learned from that battle. I wish today to speak briefly only on one, and that's the need for reform of the 40B cost certification process. This should not be a Democrat versus Republican issue, or a liberal versus conservative issue, or even a city versus suburb issue. This legislation is about good government, pure and simple. It's about reform, and it's about local aid or revenue. I'll make quick comments to both. On the issue of reform, when the State Inspector General uncovers what he calls, and I quote, one of the biggest financial scandals in the Commonwealth's history, we should take action. I wish to commend the work of Gregory Sullivan, a former member of this chamber who was here earlier today. He gave his first maiden speech in 1975. He's now our Inspector General. And as a quick recap for those who haven't been able to follow the issue recently, as part of Chapter 40B, for-profit developers have to limit their profit to a 20% margin. Anything over 20%, Mr. Speaker, as you know, must be returned to that host community to build more affordable housing. The State Inspector General, however, he found in auditing at random 10 completed 40B projects, he found substantial problems with 7. Of those 7, 5 actually exceeded their 20% cap, owing the communities anywhere from tens of thousands to millions of dollars. Mr. Speaker, I want to just reference one, because it references with one of our members here. There was a great case recently in Sharon, in the town of Sharon, where a developer bought a piece of land and stated in his site eligibility letter that it was valued at $10 million. After pressure from Sharon residents, as well as the gentleman from Sharon, a second appraisal was done that showed the property was only worth $2.5 million, and they had a site eligibility letter that was withdrawn. If it wasn't from pressure from the gentleman from Sharon and the Inspector General, Mass Housing would never have looked at this issue, looked at it twice. Mr. Speaker, on the second part of this, I appreciate that we have much to debate today. I would acknowledge that this issue is being reviewed, Judge. I know from the distinguished gentleman from Alston-Brighton, whom I spoke with. There's a special commission that was set up through Senate Post-Audit and Oversight. I've spoken to the senator from Taunton. I understand, Mr. Speaker, that we will be having legislation come from Post-Audit and Oversight. I ask that we give due attention to this matter and that we pass 40B cost certification this term. Thank you very much for your attention, Mr. Speaker, and to all the members.
Chair would like to congratulate the gentleman from Marshfield.